Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm here to give 3 quick reviews for the titles that I read for the 2010 Sami Rohr Prize. The Sami Rohr Prize honors emerging Jewish writers in nonfiction or fiction, depending on the year, with the even years being nonfiction years. You can find a playlist to all of my Sami Rohr reviews down below. For 2010, I read 2 books of academic scholarship and 1 memoir. To a certain degree, I think there's a sense of theme in these 3 books, or maybe I'm just grasping at straws to make these reviews easier. The 2 academic histories deal with aspects of Jewish public life in the 20th century America. The memoir deals with more specific individual and 21st means of identity. The first book I want to talk about is Station Identification, A Cultural History of Yiddish Radio in the United States by R.A. Gilman. I still have a lot of trouble with these long nonfiction titles. Gilman is a Chancellor's Leadership Professor at the University of California, Davis. Gilman looks at culture as it's understood through radio in that medium's heyday. It's a very feet-on-the-ground sort of study, and I think the weakest parts of the book are when he gets too embroiled into federal bureaucracy. When Eastern European immigrants are flooding to this country in the early 20th century, what do they want? It turns out that what they want, in Gilman's terminology, is an acoustic community, to listen to people who sound like them. That's how Yiddish made its way out of the highbrow theater and into the lowbrow radio medium. With its variety shows and melodramas and occasional religious advice. People tended to fanboy or fangirl over their favorite celebrities, sending in tons of mail, or attending public shows. That's a nice reminder of how the past and the present aren't so different. But a lot of this stuff you could probably find in the broader American community too. Yiddish continued to offer Jews something unique. In the years leading up to World War II, when America was keeping its isolationist stance, Yiddish radio was a place where Jews could talk freely about their concerns about what was going on in Europe. In the latter 20th century, and now, I'd argue, Yiddish is actually receiving a resurgence, even though the number of Yiddish speakers is down, largely due to an appreciation for the music. To end with the picture on the cover, this is Jean Gornish, who played Sheinele the Chazante, or Sheinele the Lady Cantor. With women having this chance to sing religious music, the radio ergo offered a progressive outlet that even Reformed Judaism at the time would not. The book says this about Gornish's career and aspirations. According to her promotional material, after being graduated from high school, Miss Gornish, Sheinele the Chazante, even to her classmates, received many flattering offers to appear in swanky nightclubs and as a soloist with outstanding bands, but all of these offers could not lure her away from the Chazonoth. Her mind was already made up to launch out on a professional career as a woman cantor, and she loves to be called Sheinele die Chazante. It's a very hard word to say in Yiddish. Born and raised in Philadelphia, Gornish began appearing locally in 1936 and eventually earned a contract with Planters Hi-Hat Peanut Oil, which sponsored her appearance on stations in New York and Philadelphia and Chicago. In both press photos and performances, Sheinele always appeared in full cantorial garb, including a long black gown and a black cap, and she often stood behind a podium draped in black satin in order to emphasize the religious gravity of her performances. Eventually, Gornish became so popular that she had fan clubs in both Chicago and Philadelphia, and when her contracts ended in those cities, her fans organized lavish dinners in her honor. So yes, this was very much what I would term an of-the-people sort of profession. But next I want to talk about the more esoteric and pie-in-the-sky book that I've read, called Speaking of Jews, Rabbis, Intellectuals, and the Creation of an American Public Identity by Lila Corin Berman. She's a professor of history at Temple University and the director of the Finkelstein Center for American Jewish History. I know I'm being a little cheeky with my feelings about this book, but the heavy philosophizing, sociology-laden tone did tend to wear me down. This certainly isn't as much of a feet-on-the-ground book as the other one. Berman does chronicle a lot of fascinating rabbis and intellectuals, but sometimes I got the feeling that they were just dictating thoughts to one another from their ivory towers. But the biographical notes are a bit of a relief. And we do get to see what these men are studying and what that says about American attitudes toward Jews in that moment. Like in the 1920s, sociologist Lewis Wirth fought an uphill battle trying to get non-Jewish colleagues to be interested in his work chronicling the Jewish ghetto. But a few decades later, post-World War II and in the midst of the anti-communist, pro-religion Cold War, academics like Oscar Handlin and Nathan Grazer had better luck with their ideas of ethnicity and American minorities. I thought I'd again turn to this cover because yet again we see another Jew on the radio. This photo is of Rabbi Louis Finkelstein, the then leader of the conservative Jewish movement. The conservative denomination kind of got a foothold in public speaking and interfaith dialogue because of their seminary's proximity to the New York radio stations. Here's a quote about Finkelstein's radio program, The Eternal Light. In 1946, the Hooper Rating Company estimated that 5 million listeners tuned in to each episode of The Eternal Light. Jews and non-Jews across the country wrote letters praising the show and often requested scripts from episodes that they had particularly enjoyed. Some Jews remarked that the program made them feel proud to be Jewish and gave them a deeper understanding of who they were. To the delight of the producers, others characterized it as an embodiment of democracy. A listener from Denver, for example, wrote that the show brought new meaning to democracy when we hear our Jewish ideals dramatized in a Jewish way as freely as other people's. Jews and non-Jewish soldiers stationed in training camps throughout the United States wrote that they tuned into the show regularly and found that it helped fuel their patriotism and desire to defend American democracy. Small-town Jews emphasized that the program was one of the few ways in which they could connect with the larger Jewish world. A listener from Lyndonville, Vermont, compared the show to Manna from Heaven. Both Jews and non-Jews commended the program for fostering better interfaith relationships, using terms like goodwill and tolerance. A woman from North Charleston, South Carolina wrote, "I am a Gentile who is finding it easier to admire and like the Jewish people through your broadcast." So despite myself, with quotes like that, I must concede that this movement in this book chronicles more than wispy ideas and dusty professors. Berwin shows the ways that Jews succeed in using popular media to educate Jews and non-Jews alike. And I get inklings into how this sort of outreach continues into podcasts and articles and blogs and so forth today. But sometimes one must get out of the classroom and confront one's specific Jewish identity in the here and now. Or at least that's how I felt when reading my favorite of the 3 books, Danya Ruttenberg's Memoir, Surprised by God, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Religion. Ruttenberg is a rabbi, writer, and editor who lives in the Boston area. And I felt an immediate affinity for her memoir. She's deeply involved in the secular world. She was a punk rocker as a teen. And then she gravitated toward a more progressive understanding of Judaism. The memoir documents her return to the religion as she begins to uncover textual study and a lifestyle that fulfills her spiritual needs. Ruttenberg comes from an academic background in philosophy and religious study. And sometimes I do think that her thought dumps in the memoir could get away from her. But overall, this was a direct but not dogmatic look at tackling questions of faith and holding yourself accountable to your beliefs. Like, if you want to be included as part of a community, and it's meaning for you to partake in certain rituals, then you should probably do that, self. What is the appeal of Judaism to a 21st century woman living today? Is it a mix of reading, study, and heritage? The rabbi phrases it much more complexly. And I had feels enough about this quote to post it to my Facebook page. I can find a lot of different ways to explain why I was drawn to Judaism. There's a strong ethical tradition, but also a tremendous awe for the transcendent. It's a faith that is comfortable with debate and a diversity of opinion. Of the 5,000 legal disagreements recorded in the Talmud, only 50 or so are settled on the page, leaving open the possibility that the right answer isn't so obvious. At the same time, as philosopher Yeshayahu Leibowitz suggests, what Judaism created was a community that maintained the Torah and observed its mitzvot, a community that retained its identity despite extreme differences in theological opinion. Judaism can embrace groups with radically different ideologies, Kabbalists and rationalists, Hasidim, and the opponents who have gone as far as to try to excommunicate them, because of a unity of practice that holds them together. In other words, to some degree, it's less important how one understands what keeping Shabbat is all about than the fact that one does it. There's a tremendous freedom in that. Not only wide berth in terms of how one makes sense of one's religious life, but room for those understandings to shift and change over time. I could write for days about why I came to God through Judaism, why I chose and fell in love with this particular religion. If I hadn't been born Jewish, though, would I have sought out Torah? I'm not sure. Though Judaism is undoubtedly a communal religion, there is something so viscerally personal about this quote, about this connection. It's not necessarily feminist, though in other parts of the memoir, Ruttenberg weaves through the complexities of 21st century reality and an age-old religion. It seemed like the perfect way to end my video on Jewish reading, though technically it was the first of these 3 books that I read in April. Speaking of April, I had hoped to film this during that month, but alas, I am filming it in May. One of those scheduling things that surely only I care about. But I really do hope that you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for sticking with me. You can find links to all of my Goodreads reviews for these books and other pertinent information down below. Happy reading, everyone, and I'll see you next time.